The hall was full and loud and smelling of pepper soup and lice, uncles in their best egg barda, aunties with fresh gel-tied highlight crowns, cousins laughing and taking photos like we were the happiest family in Enugu. My mother stood at the front of the room, holding a microphone, smiling the smile she used for church and important people. She called my name. She said today was about healing, about moving forward together. I stood up slowly. My legs were steady, even though my heart was hitting my ribs like something trying to escape. I walked to the front, carrying a small Bluetooth speaker and a flash drive. My hand was shaking, but nobody could see that from where they sat. I looked around the room at every single face. These were the people. These were the exact mouths. I plugged in the flash drive. I pressed play, and the first voice that pulled out of that speaker was my Auntie Ngozi, calling me a useless boy who would die poor and alone. The room stopped breathing. 1 month before that afternoon, I was sitting on the floor of my rented room in a job because my plastic chair had broken and I had not replaced it yet. I was eating dry bread and drinking water and pretending it was a choice. 3 weeks earlier, the logistics company, where I worked as a dispatch coordinator, had called 12 of us into a meeting room and told us the company was restructuring. They gave us a brown envelope each. Mine had 1 month's salary and a handshake. That was it. 3 years of my life for a brown envelope and a handshake. I had no savings because every time I saved, something happened: rent, medical bill, family emergency, always something. So there I was, floor, bread, water. Then my phone rang and it was my mother calling for the Sunday family video call, and I dried my hands on my trousers and answered with a smile she could see. There were 4 of us on that video call. My mother, my elder brother Emeka, who lived in GRA Enugu and drove a Prado and wore Versace to church, my younger brother Obinna, who had just won a catering contract with a hotel in Abuja, and me, Chinedu, the one on the floor eating bread. My mother asked if I had found work. I said I was still searching. She made the sound she always made, that small exhale through her nose that meant she had expected exactly this. Then Emeka laughed. Not a surprised laugh, not an uncomfortable laugh, a big, slow, comfortable laugh like a man settling deeper into a chair he has always owned. He said, "Chinedu, I have been watching you 4 years. You are a disappointment. You will never succeed in this life." My mother said nothing. Obinna looked away from the camera. I smiled. I held that smile on my face like a mask nailed to wood. But something behind the mask cracked clean in half that night. I could not sleep. I lay on my mattress staring at the ceiling and listening to the generator outside and thinking about Emeka's laugh, the comfortable weight of it, how it carried no guilt, because guilt requires you to believe you have done something wrong. To Emeka, saying that to me was not wrong. It was simply true, like commenting on weather. I sat up at 2 in the morning and looked at my old techno phone on the floor beside me, and I had a thought that arrived so quietly it almost did not feel like a decision. What if I just recorded things? Not to fight anyone. Not yet. Just to have proof that I was not imagining it, that the things being said to me were real and I was not too broken to be reading them correctly. I opened the voice recorder. I tested it inside my shirt pocket. The audio was clear. You could hear everything and see nothing. That night I made a decision whose full meaning I would not understand for another 30 days. The recording started small. The next family call 2 days later. Obinna talking about his hotel contract while my mother praised every detail. Nobody asked about my job search. 40 minutes of call and not one question about Chinedu. I filed it. Then my sister Ade said she needed to speak to my mother privately, and I said good night and left the call. But I left the call on mute by mistake. I only discovered this the next morning when I went to delete the file. I heard Ade's voice say clearly, "Mama, Chinedu has been borrowing money from Auntie Chisholm without telling anyone. She told me herself." My mother hissed that long slow hiss of hers. That boy, always taking without shame. I sat on the edge of my mattress and listened to it twice. I had borrowed 5,000 naira from Auntie Chisholm 4 months ago. I had paid every kobo back within 3 weeks. But repayment is a quiet thing. Debt is a story people love to keep telling. I started visiting home more often. I told my mother I wanted to reconnect and help around the house. She seemed pleased. She made my favorite soup the first weekend. I sat in the kitchen, watching her cook, and I thought maybe I was wrong about everything. Maybe the recordings would show me something softer underneath. Maybe I was building a case against people who loved me badly, but still loved me. Then my auntie Ngozi arrived that same evening and sat in the parlor with my mother, and within 10 minutes, she had called my dressing shabby, my ambition childish, and my future something she did not want to think about. She said it all pleasantly, the way some people deliver poison with a smile, because they have convinced themselves it is medicine. My phone was in my shirt pocket the entire time. I smiled and offered to bring them water. In the kitchen, I stood by the tap and breathed slowly. I filed the recording when I got back to Lagos. I labeled it Day 6. My cousin Tobe's wedding in Onitsha was the moment I stopped doubting what I was doing. The whole family travelled. I wore my best shirt, the one with no fraying at the collar yet. Obina arrived and the compound transformed around him. My mother held his face in both hands. My uncle gave a speech and pointed at Obina and said, "This is the son who makes us forget our suffering." I sat at the back table eating jollof rice and watching my family be a family for someone else. That night in the hotel room with 2 cousins, I put my earpiece in and played back the day's recording. I was almost at the end when I heard it. My mother's voice, low, talking to Auntie Ngozi somewhere between the hall and the parking lot. She said, "I love all my children, but God knows, I sacrificed too much for the wrong one. Chinedu took everything I gave and returned nothing." I pulled the earpiece out. I sat in the dark between my 2 sleeping cousins and did not move for a very long time. I went back to Lagos carrying that recording like a stone in my chest. I told myself she was tired. I told myself it was a hard day and people say things at weddings, that the wine helped along. I visited home the following week and sat with her, and she was warm, and she gave me leftover stew to take back, and I thought maybe I had heard it wrong. Then Auntie Ngozi visited again. I placed my phone behind the dish rack in the kitchen and went to sit outside. When I retrieved it that evening, the recording had caught 30 minutes of conversation. I sat in the bus back to Lagos, listening through my earpiece. Most of it was normal, but near the end, Auntie Ngozi said, "Chinedu will never be respected in this family again. He has lost too many chances," and my mother laughed. It was not a big laugh. It was small and soft and tired, but it was agreement. That soft laugh was the sound of a mother agreeing that her son was finished. I stared out the bus window at the dark highway and said nothing. 3 days after that visit, my mother called me for a normal check-in. We spoke for a few minutes. She thought she ended the call. She did not. My phone kept recording. I heard her move to another room. Then I heard crying. Private crying. The kind people release only when they are completely alone, and they believe no walls are listening. Through the tears, her voice came broken and quiet. She said, "I chose survival over fairness. God forgive me. I chose survival over fairness." A long silence. Then she said something that made my pen stop over my notebook completely. She whispered, "The paper I signed under pressure." That was where it all began. Then the line went dead. I sat at my table for 10 minutes without moving. What paper? Signed under what pressure? I underlined the sentence 3 times. I circled it. I drew an arrow to the margin and wrote one word. Find. I found it by accident, the way the most important things usually arrive. I was helping my mother sort through an old storage box during a weekend visit when my hand touched a brown envelope buried beneath old receipts and expired warranties. My name was printed on the front. I turned away from my mother casually and opened it. Inside was a letter from a federal government scholarship board, dated 6 years ago. It said I had been selected for a fully funded engineering scholarship, full tuition, accommodation, monthly allowance, Abuja. I read it 3 times. I had never seen this letter. I had never been told. At the bottom, in blue ink, someone had written, "Declined on behalf of applicant. Family consent withheld." The handwriting was neat and familiar. I knew that handwriting the way you know the handwriting of someone who has signed things in your presence your entire life. It was Emeka's. I folded the letter. I put it in my bag. I turned back to my mother and smiled and said, "Nothing important, Mama." My phone had recorded every second of my breathing changing. After finding that letter, the pain completed its transformation. It stopped being pain. It became something harder and colder and more useful. I stopped visiting hoping to feel something warm. I started visiting with purpose. I thought about angles. I thought about timing and rooms and who spoke freely around whom. I thought about which conversations happened in the corridor and which happened in the kitchen. I became a student of my own family. My cousin Ifeanyi called me that week and said the family was worried about how quiet I had become. I laughed and said I was just focused. He said, "Focused on what? You have nothing to focus on." I thanked him for checking on me. I hung up. I checked that the recording had saved clearly. It had. I added it to the folder, now 41 files deep, and went back to my notebook. Something was coming. I could feel it the way you feel rain before the first drop falls. The following weekend I noticed the family had changed around me. Nobody insulted me directly anymore. They spoke in careful half-sentences. My mother watched my shirt pocket twice in 1 hour. Obina kept finding reasons to leave the room when I entered. They suspected something, but they did not know what. I moved my phone from my shirt pocket to my trouser pocket. I relaxed my face. I laughed louder. I offered to help in the kitchen and made everyone tea. The suspicion eased. That evening, my uncle Sylvanus, the oldest in the family, arrived and asked everyone to give him a moment with my mother. I was supposed to be in the backyard. I was actually sitting just around the corner of the corridor wall, completely still, my phone in my hand. Uncle Sylvanus waited for silence, then said in a low voice that carried further than he knew, "That boy must never find out what was written in Ez's original will." I pressed record harder against my palm. My grandfather's will. The land in Anambra. I finally had the thread. My grandfather Ez had died when I was 11. He had a large piece of land in Orca that the family mentioned at meetings, the way people mention something valuable they are protecting. I had never thought to question it. I went back to Lagos and looked for Mr. Okafor, a retired civil servant who had been my grandfather's neighbor and friend for 20 years. I found him at his compound in Enugu during my next visit. Over tea, I asked about the Orca land. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "Your grandfather's original will gave equal shares to all grandchildren. You were included, Chinedu." I asked what happened to that will. Mr. Okafor set down his cup. He said slowly, "A replacement document appeared 2 years after Ez died. A lawyer in Enugu processed it." He paused. "The lawyer's name is Barrister Noji." The tea went cold in my hand. Barrister Noji, the man I had personally helped find accommodation when he arrived in Lagos 5 years ago with nothing and nobody. I returned to Lagos and the recordings kept delivering. My mother and Emeka had a phone argument I captured while sitting in the next room during a visit. Emeka accused my mother of mismanaging compound money. She accused him of taking more than his share of the rent income from the Onitsha property. Their voices rose until Emeka said something that turned my food cold in front of me. He said, "If Chinedu ever pieces together the land document and the scholarship, this family is finished. We need to cut him off completely before he starts asking the wrong questions." Silence. Then my mother's voice, quieter than I had ever heard it. "We will handle it at the reunion." I sat in that kitchen holding my phone and feeling the full shape of what I was dealing with. They were not just people who had treated me badly. They had made decisions, deliberate, calculated decisions, and now they were making another one, about me. For the last time, that night I made my decision, and I made it completely. I would not confront anyone before the reunion. I would not ask questions. I would not give a single sign that I knew anything at all. Every part of me wanted to call Emeka and let him hear what I knew. But I had watched this family operate my entire life, and I knew exactly what would happen. They would close together like a fist. They would call me unstable. They would reframe every recording as misunderstanding and every document as coincidence, and by the end of it, I would be the villain, and they would be the wounded ones. The only way this worked was if they heard themselves, their own words, their own voices, in a room full of witnesses where there was nowhere left to hide. I opened my laptop. I began building the final file. I worked until 4 in the morning. I titled it the only thing it could be called, 1 Month of Truth. The reunion invitation arrived 2 mornings later on cream paper, with the family crest at the top. It announced a formal gathering in Enugu. It said there would be a reconciliation segment to address outstanding family matters and restore unity. My mother called the same afternoon. Her voice was careful and warm, the voice she used when she wanted something. She said she hoped I would come with an open heart. She said the family loved me and wanted to move forward. I told her I would be there. I said I was genuinely looking forward to it. She sounded relieved. After the call, I sat back and thought about what outstanding family matters meant to them. They were going to sit me in front of the elders and ask me to apologize. They were going to make me bow my head before people who had stolen my scholarship, removed my name from my grandfather's will, mocked my poverty, and laughed at my silence. And they expected me to say sorry for making them uncomfortable. I started preparing. The final week before the reunion, I visited home twice. Both times I was warm and easy and helpful. I made my mother laugh. I sat with my father and watched evening news and brought him water without being asked. He patted my shoulder once and said I was growing up. I agreed. The second visit, very late at night, I was sitting in the corridor when I heard my father's voice from the master bedroom. He was on a call he believed was private. I moved close to the door and held my phone toward the gap at the bottom. His voice came low and unguarded. He said, "I am not proud of how we handled Chinedu, but we cannot undo it now." A pause. Then, Emeka needed the foundation more. We thought Chinedu was stronger. We thought he could survive anything we did not give him. Another pause, longer this time. Then my father said quietly, almost to himself, "But I was wrong about what he was born into." I pressed the phone harder against the floor. My father had never once called me strong to my face. I stayed awake until morning replaying that recording, not because I was angry, because I was trying to understand what my father meant by those final words, wrong about what he was born into. I had heard that kind of sentence before in family conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. I had always told myself it meant nothing. Now I was not sure. I added the recording to the master file and sat with my notebook open and drew a line connecting every piece. The replaced will, the scholarship blocked by Emeka, the paper my mother signed under pressure, the thing Uncle Sylvanus said about what I must never find out, my father's confession about being wrong about my origins. These were not separate incidents. They were chapters of one story that had been kept from me deliberately and completely. I was not just the family disappointment. I was something they had decided to manage, and I still did not know why. 2 days before the reunion, Barrister Nodji called me. His voice was tight and careful, the voice of a man carrying something he has decided to finally put down. We met at a quiet buka near his Enugu office. He ordered nothing. He looked at the table. Then he pushed a brown envelope across to me. Inside was a photocopy of my grandfather's original will. My name was there among the grandchildren. Equal share, clearly written. Below it was the replacement document dated 2 years after my grandfather's death. My name was gone. In the signature section, I saw my father's signature, Emeka's signature, and a third one. Nodji tapped it. "That is mine," he said quietly. "I was young and I owed your uncle a debt and I was afraid. I have carried this for 11 years. He looked up at me. His eyes were the eyes of a man who had rehearsed this moment many times. "I am sorry, Chinedu." I closed the envelope. I stood up. I said, "Thank you, Barrister. You have given me the last piece." I walked out into the afternoon and the sun hit my face like something being lifted. That night I assembled everything for the last time. Documents, flash drive, 47 minutes of audio arranged in clean sequence. I listened to the full compilation from beginning to end with my eyes closed. Emeka's laugh on the video call. My mother's soft agreement when Auntie Ngozi wrote me off. My father's private confession. The creditor calling about Emeka's 4 million naira debt. The recording of Uncle Sylvanus warning that I must never know about the will. My own silence underneath all of it. Just a man holding a phone, listening to the people who were supposed to hold him. When the audio ended, I sat in the quiet of my room for a long time. I was not angry anymore. Anger had burned itself out weeks ago. What remained was something cleaner. Certainty. Then at midnight, someone tried the handle of my door. Slow, careful, once, twice, then nothing. I sat completely still in the dark with my phone already recording. Morning came, and Ifeanyi was sitting in the corridor outside my room. He said he had come early to travel with me, but his eyes went straight to my bag and stayed there. He asked casually what the speaker was for. I said I had something to present at the reunion. He stared at me for a long moment, and then dropped every pretense completely. He stepped close and lowered his voice. Chinedu, I know what you are carrying. Someone told me. I am begging you as your blood. Do not do this. If you play those recordings in front of the elders, you will not just lose this family. You will make enemies that will follow you for years. Is it worth it? For what? To feel right for one afternoon. I looked at him. I thought about the scholarship letter with Emeka's handwriting at the bottom. I thought about my name missing from my grandfather's will. I thought about my mother's soft laugh of agreement. Then I picked up my bag and said, Ifeanyi, I have been losing this family slowly for my entire life. Today I am just letting everyone else see what I have always known. We arrived at the compound, and it looked like a celebration. Canopies in the family colors, caterers in white uniforms, a hired MC testing his microphone, children running between the legs of elders. My mother met me at the entrance and held my face in both her hands the way she used to when I was small. She looked into my eyes for a long moment like she was searching for something. Then she said softly, You look well, my son. Whatever happens today, please, do not embarrass us. She squeezed my face gently between her palms. I covered her hands with mine. I said, Mama, I love you. I have always loved you. I just need you to finally hear me. She smiled like she thought I meant something harmless. She turned to welcome another guest. I walked into the hall and found a seat near the front. I placed my bag beneath my chair. I ate the food they served. I watched Emeka hold court at the high table. His voice big and easy. His lies wearing his face, so comfortably by now they had become him. The MC called for quiet after lunch. He spoke about family being the foundation of everything. He spoke about unity and legacy. Then he said there was a special reconciliation segment, and he called my name and said the family wanted to hear from me. I stood up. I took a slow breath. I picked up my bag and walked to the front of the hall, and every eye in the room followed me. I brought out the speaker. I connected the flash drive. I looked up at the hall one time. All of them. My father sitting straight. My mother's hands folded in her lap. Emeka watching me with flat, unreadable eyes. Aunties and uncles and cousins and elders all waiting for Chinedu to apologize and make things comfortable again. I said, 1 month ago I started listening to this family more carefully than I ever had before. I want to share what I heard. I pressed play. Auntie Ngozi's voice hit the room, something physical. Useless boy who will die poor and alone. Not one person in that hall moved. The hall broke apart like something that had only been held together by everyone agreeing not to look at it directly. Auntie Ngozi stood and shouted the recordings were edited and taken out of context. Ifeanyi moved toward the speaker, and I stepped in front of it and did not move. The clip of the creditor calling about Emeka's 4 million naira debt played, and I watched Emeka's face go the color of old concrete. Someone at the back started murmuring. The scholarship clip played. I watched my mother press her hand flat against her chest. The clip of Uncle Sylvanus warning that I must never find out about the will played into a silence so complete I could hear the canopy fabric moving outside. Then Emeka stood up and crossed the room toward me, with his hand out to take the device, and his eyes saying things his mouth had not decided yet. I picked up the speaker and held it against my chest and looked at him directly for the first time in years. I said quietly. Emeka, sit down. Or I hand every file in this bag to a lawyer before this canopy comes down tonight. He stopped. He looked at my bag. He sat down. The final recording played. My father's voice, private and unguarded, filling every corner of that decorated hall. I was wrong about what he was born into. We thought Chinedu was stronger. We thought he could survive anything we did not give him. Complete silence. My mother was crying without sound, her shoulders moving in small shakes. Emeka was staring at the floor like a man reading something written there that only he could see. My father sat in his chair and looked at me across the room, and his face held something I had spent my entire life waiting to see in it, and was too late to do anything with now. I removed the flash drive. I put it in my pocket. I picked up my bag. I looked at the hall one final time. The bright canopy colors, the half-eaten food on tables, the unity banner someone had paid to print still hanging cheerfully above it all. Then I walked to the door. No one called my name. I stepped outside into the clean open Enugu afternoon, and I kept walking, steady and straight, like a man who has finally put down something he carried so long and feels, for the first time, the true weight of what his arms were always capable of. Sometimes the truth does not destroy families. It only shows what was already broken long before you arrived with the evidence.